Alright, so today we are going to go through day 1 of AMI. If you've already taken a look at it, then you know that this is really just a review over things that we've gone over, and so it shouldn't be too difficult at all. This is not new information. If you have your notes, then it should be really simple to get these knocked out. But for the people that don't have their notes, we're going to go ahead and quickly go through those to make sure that you have the information that you need. Okay? So at the very top, it's talking about the definition of communication. And as we've talked about before, it's the process of creating and exchanging meaning through symbolic interaction. The next part is that as a process, communication constantly moves and changes. It does not stand still. And again, this is all the things that we've talked about for weeks and weeks and weeks now, so I'm not really going to dive into what all this means because you should know that already. This is just to make sure that you kind of have a review over the time period that we're going to be staying at our homes because of COVID, and we'll move into some new stuff as the AMI progresses. Meaning involves the thoughts, ideas, and understanding shared by communicators. Symbolic means that we rely on words and nonverbal behavior to communicate meanings and feelings. And then I'm not so sure that we talked about all of them, but I know that for sure we talked about under the process of communication. On the far left, it's context provides the people, occasion, and task. I know that we talked about that in class. The next is physical environment is the actual place or space where communication occurs. And then climate influences the emotional atmosphere. And I think that we actually did talk about all those. The bottom half of that very first day of AMI is very simple. It's just the communication model. You guys actually made your own communication models in class, and we talked about this in depth. This does have a couple of different aspects that we didn't cover, and so specifically in the middle. Everything else should be very simple. So starting from the top and then going clockwise, it's going to be the sender is the one that begins the communication process because they want another to understand the message. And the way that they do that is encoding. That's the mental process of assigning meaning. Their message is, of course, information that is exchanged. It can be verbal or nonverbal. In order to get their message across, they have to choose a channel. That's the space or means in which the message is transmitted. And then it has to go to a receiver. So that's the one who receives or believes that they have received a message. And once the receiver gets that, they are going to decode. Decoding is the interpretation of a message by the receiver. And then whenever they decide to send a return message, that's known as feedback. That's the observable response to another's message. And they also have to choose a channel in order to do so. In the middle, starting from the very top, we're going to work our way down. Anything that interferes with a message and it's usually temporary is known as noise. And then there's two different types of noise. The very first is internal. It originates from inside of a communicator. And then there's external, and that's distractions in the channel or distractions in the environment. The next one is any obstacle that blocks communication is known as a communication barrier. And those also involve the same type of internal-external duality. So it can be internal, which resides in the communicator, or external, which exists in the channel or other components of the communication process. So again, this is information that we've covered time and time again. It's in your notes. This should not be difficult. The same thing with AMI Day 2. It's going to be very quick, but if you take a look in your notes, you'll see that you actually have these written down already, as long as you've actually kept up with those. So starting at the very top and working our way down, and again, I'm not going to go in depth into these because we already had days where we talked about these in class. This is just going to be a review. Communications is transactional because it involves an exchange. Communication is complex for several reasons. It's interactive because many processes are involved. It's symbolic because symbols are open to interpretation. It's personal and cultural because a person's culture can add a new or different meaning to a phrase or gesture. It's irreversible because once a message is sent, it cannot be taken back. It's circular because it involves both original messages and feedback, which is necessary to confirm the communication has occurred. It's also purposeful because there's always a reason behind a message and it helps us meet our needs. Communication is unavoidable because it's impossible to not communicate. Communication is continuous because it continues to impact, influence future interactions, and shape our relationships. Communication skills can be learned because they can always be improved. And then we have the 5 levels of communication. And again, we've talked about these. Intrapersonal communication is the communication that occurs in your own mind. It is self-talk, which are the inner speech or mental conversations that we carry on with ourselves. It is the basis of your feelings, biases, prejudices, and beliefs. Interpersonal communication is the communication between two people, but can involve more or in informal conversations. Through this type of communication, we maintain relationships. Then we have small group communication. It's communication within formal or informal groups or teams. It is group interaction that results in decision-making, problem-solving, and discussion within an organization. And then we have one-to-group. Communication involves a speaker who seeks to inform, persuade, or motivate an audience. And then finally, we have mass communication, is the electronic or print transmission of messages to the general public. Outlets known as mass media include things like radio, television, film, and printed materials designed to reach large audiences. So as I told y'all last week, we would probably have AMI days, and here we are. I know that things can be a little bit discouraging. It can be a little bit sad. It can be a little bit scary. And if you're not experiencing those, that's also fine. But I just want you to know that Dardanelle High School stands with our students, that I particularly love my students, and that if you need anything, just make sure that you message me at the Remind 101, or you can even email me and tell me anything that you might need, and I will try to the best of my ability to make sure that you get it. All right, thank you guys. Hopefully you get this done. This is going to be graded, so make sure that you have it, and we'll turn it in when we get back to school. Yeah. Also, all of this stuff is going to stack up, and so we're going to actually have a test probably the Friday after we return. And if you wait until the Friday that we return, it's not going to be the best situation, because you won't be able to pass that test, more than likely. This first part is just review, so you would be able to pass that part, but once we get to the aspects that are new information, then it's going to be a little bit more difficult to just wing it during the test. All right, bye guys.